The Bush administration did not try.
Would like to see our president get us out of the war, because the war is a total catastrophe.
It's a full-blown dictatorship in this country. He's vowed to question these phone company executives about volunteering to provide the government with my telephone records and yours and tens of millions of other Americans. Shortly after 9/11, AT&T, Verizon, and Bell South began providing the super-secret NSA with information on phone calls of millions of our citizens. All part of the war on terror, President Bush says. Why don't you go find Osama bin Laden and seal the country's borders and start inspecting the containers that come into our ports?
I have documentary evidence that when George Bush told the nation on the evening of October 7, 2002, that Saddam Hussein was an imminent threat to the security of this country, he was telling millions of unsuspecting Americans the exact opposite of what his own CIA had told administration officials just 6 days earlier in a classified report on October the 1st, that Hussein was not an imminent threat.
Thus, the sandbag effort by Fox News Friday afternoon. Consider the timing. The very same weekend, the national intelligence estimate would be released and show the Iraq war to be the fraudulent failure it is. Not a check on terror, but fertilizer for it. The kind of proof of incompetence for which the administration and its hyenas at Fox need to find a diversion in a scapegoat. It was the kind of cheap trick which would get a journalist fired, but a propagandist promoted. Promised to talk of charity and generosity, but instead launch into the lies and distortions with which the authoritarians among us attack the virtuous and reward the useless, and don't even be professional enough to assume the responsibility for the slanders yourself. Blame your audience for emailing you the question.
But the president has, of course, announced it's all his fault, and he's very sorry. I'm kidding, he hasn't said boo. Number 2, Gitmo-gate. The former U.S. prosecutor at Guantanamo Bay, who resigned earlier this year, has given his first interview since. Lieutenant Colonel Daryl Vandeveld telling the BBC that not only were detainees treated in a, quote, wrong, unethical, and finally immoral fashion, but that he was so appalled by conditions at Gitmo that he went to his priest for guidance. I never suffered such anguish in my life about anything, he added. The priest suggested he resign, and that is what he did. A Pentagon spokesman steamrolled right over the moral crisis to say only, we dispute Daryl Vandeveld's assertions and maintain the military commission process provides full and fair trials to accuse unlawful enemy combatants who are charged with a variety of war crimes.
But we're going to hold this administration accountable so that it never happens again.
He deserves to be prosecuted. He and Cheney need to go to The Hague and stand in the dock like they had Milosevic and others. What they did was criminal. 4,000 Americans have died as a result of their fraud on the American people.
If we have a chance of reestablishing the credibility of the United States internationally, it is reestablishing the credibility of democracy. Let's show them we can fire this president and put him in fucking jail.
The American Bar Association, full of conservative Republican lawyers, sent 3 papers, 3 reports to George W. Bush in 2005, 2006, charging him with serious violations of the U.S. Constitution. In 5 areas they're impeachable. Criminal war of aggression that was undeclared in Iraq. Number 2, systemic torture. Number 3, what Bob Barr just mentioned, snooping on Americans without judicial warrant. That's a 5-year jail term. That's a first-class penalty. Number 4, incarcerating Americans without filing charges, denying them habeas corpus. And number 5, the signing statements by Bush. He set a record where he says, I'll sign this bill by Congress, but I, King George IV, will decide whether to obey it or not. After they leave office, they are still subject, Bush and Cheney, to the criminal laws. They can still be prosecuted, just as Nixon was about to be prosecuted for a one-time burglary obstruction of justice by the Watergate Task Force report. And we recommend DAs all over the country to rustle up their statute books and convene grand juries once they leave office, but they are subject on January 21, 2009 for criminal prosecution under federal law.
Agreement and strategic agreement. Let's listen in to the reaction.
Listen, and I want to thank the motherfuckers who helped them move that shit about the White House. Get it moving, bitch. is motherfucking